Come back to the forgotten room. The doors we open don't lead to answers. They lead to questions that should never have been buried. Sign up now if you're interested in stories of quiet horror, forgotten histories, and unsettling truths. This journey will stay with you long after it's over. Let me show you a house on Weaver's Hill now. This was supposed to be a normal assignment for Miriam Keller, a social work intern who was almost 23 years old in 1982. She was sent to the Appalachian District, rotation of welfare. Like a lot of young interns, she came to Ashfern, West Virginia, with big dreams and plans. Instead, she found a heavy silence that didn't feel like peace. It felt like being away. A white 3-story house with an iron gate stood at the far end of the town's last paved road. It is neat and even, and the windows are always shut and the curtains are drawn. That was the Holloway house. Edith and Eleanor Holloway, who were twin sisters, owned it. Never married, no known relatives, and hasn't been seen in public, but everyone in town knew they had taken in girls as pets. Over the course of 20 years, 12 of them came from different countries and all came from hard places. Still, no complaints had ever been made. There was never a child who left. It was strange that no one ever seemed to hear them. Not a single shout, song, or even laugh in the playground. The gate was already open when Miriam got there on Monday morning with her clipboard. Edith replied to her with a warm tone that she had practiced. "You must be from South Carolina." Eleanor was right behind her, like a second thought. She copied her sister's face. "We have been waiting for you." They were pale, beautiful, and spoke in a strangely synchronized way. The kind of women who spoke softly and was ready for everyone to lean in. It was not only clean inside the house, but also very well organized in a way that made you feel uneasy. Everything where it belongs. There was nothing that made it look like kids lived there. Marks from crayons, socks that got lost, and noise. Miriam had been to a lot of foster homes. It had never been this quiet. The first child she saw was a girl about 10 years old, with dark eyes and tight braids in her hair. As if she were a shadow, she moved through the hallway, stopping only to give a weak nod before going into another room. Miriam asked her softly, "Does she not speak?" Edith gave a smile. "Not unless she has to." Eleanor added, "We don't like words that aren't necessary." Being still makes things clear. Miriam was moved by that phrase. It wasn't because they were shy, it had to do with power. Miriam noticed other strange things about the house as she looked around it. Clothing beds made with hospital corners that are all the same, and handwritten schedules on the walls that say things like reflection hour, still body, still mind, and no echo after 9 p.m. There was no TV, no books, no mirrors, and only silence. In the dining room there was a long wooden table with 12 chairs that matched. Each chair had a place setting that was clean and tucked in. There are no crumbs or fingerprints. It wasn't really a house. It was more like a stage. She asked if the girls were at school. "They go to homeschool," Edith answered. "Defiance is taught by the world. It's what we teach." Eleanor walked up to her and gave her a small, folded piece of paper. The Order of Inner Silence was written on the cover. Inside were rules, levels of discipline, and a range of levels of stillness. Some phrases that Miriam couldn't stop staring at in the silent library are Tier 1 echo control, Tier 3 mind, surrender, and something else. For people who have forgotten how to listen, these are phrases. She smiled nice as she could and said, "Thank you." Then she put it in her folder. Could. But she felt a quiet warning starting to form in her stomach. It seemed like this house didn't teach people how to be still. It made it happen. She looked back one more time when she got back to her car later. There are 12 windows on the second floor, but they are all closed and clothed. In one, a child stood there and watched. Faceless, still, and quiet. This was not going to be like any other day, and Miriam Keller was not going to leave this house empty. The pamphlet was the first step. That night, when Miriam got back to her temporary home, she spread the trifold on, the little kitchen table. It wasn't really a parenting guide, even though the Holloways called it the Order of Inner Silence. It looked more like something from a long-lost sect. There were no learning goals or colorful charts. There was only block text printed in faded ink and symbols that looked like circles inside circles and broken lines going to a blank center. A quote at the top says, "Noise is the enemy of obedience. Thought is the enemy of peace. When there is complete silence, the self is given up." The content was split up. There are 5 levels. Each one showed a bigger step away from normal communication. Level 1, control for echo. The kids were told to only repeat when they were told to. Making eye contact was frowned upon. Free speech is not allowed. Word holding in Tier 2. There was silence for days on end. People are praised for being still. Movement was watched. Internal flattening at the 3rd level. Don't laugh. No words spoken. The kids wore gray clothes, mirrors taken away. Tier 4 is detachment. Names were changed to numbers. Direct addressing is not allowed. Kids stopped calling each other sister. Level 5, it's very quiet. Isolation in a quiet library until the child shows what was called no inner murmur. She read the last line 3 times. No murmur inside. It wasn't quiet. That was giving in. She felt cold when she heard the room's name, the library that is quiet. Even though it wasn't part of the house tour, it was talked about in the same casual way that a broom closet would be. It was written in pencil on the back of the pamphlet, but it was easy to read. Someone had written, "2 of us never made it back upstairs after 4 of us have been." There was no name. She could feel her breath leaving her body. That was quick. She put the paper back in her folder. Whatever it was, no one had seen it for too long. Maybe chosen to be ignored. The next day, she went back to the hallway house without telling anyone. Edith was as calm as always when she answered the door. "We didn't expect you again so soon." "I forgot a form," Miriam said. "Papers from the state. The house was just as clean and quiet on the inside." She knew where to look this time, though. She saw the narrow, dark hallway behind the kitchen that led to a door that hadn't been shown on the last tour. There was no knob. There was only a keyhole in the middle of what looked like scratches near the bottom. It wasn't said by her. Not yet. She instead asked to talk to one of the girls alone. Edith and Eleanor looked at each other. Eleanor said that they are deep in study. "Don't get in the way of their practice." "I won't bother you," Miriam replied in a soft way. "Just checking in quickly. State wants me to watch one-on-one conversations." Edith finally said yes after a moment. It was always very well. Number 6 can be made available. 6th was a pale girl who looked to be about 13 years old. She sat in the formal sitting room as if the furniture would kick her out for sitting wrong. She always had her hands on her lap. The girl smiled. "Hi, sweetheart. Would it be okay if Could we talk for a minute?" the girl asked. She stooped down so she was eye level. "I just want to know how things are going for you." "Is it really that quiet?" Still no answer. She did it again. "What is your favorite subject? A game you like? What's that?" "Not really." The girl's lip twitched and then stopped moving. Eleanor's voice came from behind her and was both sharp and soft. 6th is still finishing up Tier 3. Language gets in the way. Slowly, Miriam stood up. "Her stillness is beautiful," she said. That night, Miriam wrote her first report. She left out the pamphlet because she knew that if she turned it in now, someone would pull her off the case. She had seen it happen before. Complaints were shelved and reports were blanked out. There were too many friends in too many quiet parts of the system, and she needed more. The next time she went back, she would do something that no worker before her had dared. She would ask about the door and the room below it. There was a silence that went beyond. The following week, Miriam came back with a plan. She had memorized the layout of the hollow house and made note of the blind spots. Most importantly, she brought a small notepad with her, not to take notes, but to leave them behind. Edith was taking care of the front garden when Miriam arrived. "You're early," the woman said, wiping her hands on an apron that was too clean to have seen dirt. "I could help," Miriam said in a smooth voice. The States were encouraging more active observation. Eleanor knocked on the door and said, "You'll find there's not much chaos here to observe." Inside, all of the girls were sitting at the same desks, facing the same direction, with their backs straight as can be. Not a single pencil was present. Instead, each surface had only blank sheets of paper. She looked for a moment. The air wasn't peaceful or quiet enough. As people talked in the hallways about getting ready for stillness in Tier 4, Miriam took a chance on the evaluations. She said she had to go to the bathroom, but she sneaked into the hallway behind the kitchen instead. The locked door was still there, but it wasn't marked. Now you could see the scratches better near the base. It looked like something or someone had tried to claw their way out. She got down on her knees and put her ear to the wood. There should be silence, but not empty silence. It felt too tense and heavy, like the air behind the door was listening. A soft sound from behind her made her spin before she could stay still. One of the girls, maybe 9 years old, stood at the end of the hall. She was skinny and barefoot. She didn't say anything, but she held something out. 3 times around, a torn piece of notebook paper. She slowly walked up and took it without saying a word. The girl turned around, walked down another hallway, and didn't look back. The note was opened by Miriam. 12 people came here, 2 went missing. They are taken by the room. Do not let it go on. It only has a small drawing in the corner and no name. It looked like a line through an eye. Miriam's back throat. Made tighter. She closed the paper in half and put it in her pocket. Edith was making tea when she got back to the front room. She asked without looking up, "Did you find the bathroom?" She lied and said, "I did." Eleanor put a cup made of porcelain in front of her. "We believe stillness invites truth. Do you agree, Mrs. Keller?" This is what Miriam said. "I think silence can speak." The twins looked at each other and said, "If you know how to listen." Miriam didn't run away. The next night, Miriam. The note was copied by hand, and the first copy was burned. She knew this, but not who the girl was. She was the first crack in the foundation, and light came in through cracks. It rained at the start of the next visit. The hallway house stood the same way it always had, clean, unaltered, and unaffected by the seasons. This time, though, Miriam saw something different. See the windows. Each one had curtains pulled back from the inside. It wasn't the lace ones she had seen before. It was thick, dark, and see-through. The ones that didn't just block light. Remember, inside, the girls were put in different seats. There are 2 rows of chairs with straight backs and no desks. People are sitting with their hands on their laps and not looking at anything. We are getting ready for observation at the 5th level. Edith said that her voice was soft, but firm. "Already?" she asked Miriam. "Some of the girls are just learning how to write their names." Eleanor replied from behind, "They don't need names anymore. Not if they really stop moving." That word again, stillness. Now the echo was different. Miriam looked at all of them. She looked for the little girl with bare feet, the person who gave her the note. She wasn't there, though. "Who is the youngest?" It was a casual question. Eleanor's lips got better. She wore blue and said, "You'll have to be more specific." "Brown hair with spots." Edith said, "Now all the girls wear gray." Miriam said with a slow nod that she was worried. "Blue distracts." Yes, of course. She didn't say anything until after the afternoon prayer, though. It looked more like a pose than a devotion. Everyone bowed their heads and shut their mouths. Irene moved toward the bookcase next to the living room. It was full of the same books with the title, "Still Water, No Ripples." None had page numbers. She put a folded note between two copies and then another one under a chair cushion. They all said just one sentence. "We haven't forgotten about you." She felt someone behind her before she could go back to the main hall. It might have been a 16-year-old girl. Too much silence makes the eyes dull. Miriam didn't say anything. The girl looked at the cushion, then the bookcase, and finally at Miriam, and she blinked 2 times. There wasn't much of it, but it was planned. Later that day, Miriam was asked to watch the Tier 5 evaluation during reflection hour. She found a door she hadn't seen before by going down a hall. At the very end of the east wing, there was thin metal. It looked like a vault because it was built into the wall. There is only a small lever on the door, no knob or keyhole. Edith did it once. The door opened to the inside. After it, there is a short set of stairs. Eleanor said in a quiet voice, "This is how we measure complete surrender." There were no girls there, just a soft hum of air rising from below. Miriam did not pick up the phone. Not yet. "How long do they stay down there?" she asked. "For as long as it takes. Who gets to say when they're ready?" Their silence does. There was one last click as the door shut. She shook for the first time since she took the case that night in the car. There was a real room under the floor. The doctrine was moving faster. The girl in blue might already be inside, no matter where she was. There were no mistakes in the state files. Also, clean. Late at night, Miriam sat in her apartment and compared the Holloway adoption records with the state's system for moving kids between counties. In the past 5 years, 12 girls had been sent to Holloway's care, but one of them didn't exist. There was no birth certificate, transfer ID, or notice from a guardian. There was only a blank row in the ledger between entries 6 and 8. There was only a dash and a timestamp in entry number 7. She found the original file and tracked it down. Received minor without a name. There was no prior approval for a custody chain placement during an emergency. Who agreed with the signature that was smudged? Under the ink, though, she saw a shape. A circle with a line through it. It was the same symbol from the pamphlet, but this time there was something worse. A second stamp. It's not from West Virginia. It's from a private seal, EOS. What did it mean? She didn't know, but it wasn't from the government or the Child Welfare Department. The girl we won't name had slipped. They got into the hallway system through a door that no one was supposed to know was there. Miriam clenched her hands. When she got back to the hallway house the next morning, she asked for a full tour to check the consistency of the environment. The sisters hesitated, but then gave in. As she walked slowly, her eyes were drawn to every vent shadow and molding edge. She stopped when they got to the east wing. She asked, "May I see the lower level again?" Eleanor smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Tier 5 observation is not possible." "Strangers." Miriam gave a nod, just interested in the layout. Edith added as she shut the door to the hallway behind her. "You've seen the whole house." Miriam had seen something before, though. The light. Under the crack at the bottom of the door, a weak pulse that sounds like flickering candlelight. Miriam made a choice that night. Through the emergency disclosure portal, she sent in a flag without giving her name. The records would be locked, but the case would not be opened. There will be no more adoption approvals or silent transfers. The next day, she went back to the house without an appointment. The door was also open. Not the hall or the front door. A jar was hanging by an inch from the basement door that didn't have a knob. No one saw her. There was no voice. It wasn't empty, but the house was quiet. She went through. There was a noise coming from the stairs, but no alarm went off. She didn't get stopped. As she went down, the air got colder. Drywall was changed to stone. The walls went from being white paint to being brick. The quiet wasn't just forced, it had life to it. At the bottom, a narrow, uneven hallway with a thick black door that doesn't have a window at the end of it. When she reached for the handle, it was there. The strange sigil from the file was etched into the door just above the lock. It was a circle with a single vertical line running through it, and there were faint marks that looked like runes all around it. I remember my name written by hand below it. Miriam took a step back. The room wasn't just for being quiet, it was for an eraser. It began with chalk. Little white lines started to show up under the girls' beds. Few lines, they are always faint and low to the ground, where only a child would think to look. Sometimes they are initials. Miriam should not have seen, but she did. The first sign was under the bed of a girl named Tess. That's what the Holloways called her, at least. It looked like a capital L with a small heart next to it. It was a soft question. "Tess, do you know what this means?" The girl didn't answer, but her eyes kept going to the floor. Later that same day, another one showed up. SR scratched under A, first one on a windowsill in the classroom, and then one on a folded piece of fabric in a laundry basket. Ina. The house tried to erase names, but the girls were able to remember them. A secret list was made by Miriam in her notebook. Code, true name, suspected symbol found G7 Lily, L plus heart. G3 Mina, stitched him G9, Sarah Rose, SR ledge etching. It was clear that the hallways weren't just trying to keep people quiet. They were changing their identities. Instead of names, the girls were given codes. This is G1 through G12. Better to remember than to manage. It was called Naming Liberation in the Doctrine. It said in a sermon pamphlet, "A name is an anchor. To set them free, we must cut the rope." But the girls were thinking about what they had read. Every chalk mark and stitched thread done in secret was a protest. In one evening, Miriam stayed later than usual and pretended to take stock of the kitchen. From the hall, she saw the girls line up for the evening quiet. She saw something very interesting. One girl, the one called G7, blinked deliberately at another. 2 blinks, a pause, 1 blink. It wasn't random, it was words. Under the doctrine, they had set up a way for people to talk to each other. Something stronger than silence that came from it. Eye contact, finger taps, and the sound of a shoelace scratching against a wooden floor all carry a new code that isn't spoken. The people in the hallways didn't see it, but Miriam did. When she got home, she started to figure out what the blinks, taps, and positions meant. There was a pattern, and in the middle of it was, they never talked about a girl. Number 7, the one without a name, she was not lost. But only those who were still brave enough to whisper did people remember her. If you can call it that, her name was G1. She didn't say anything. She didn't blink. Everyone else slept and ate at the same time, but she didn't. Still, Miriam started to see her everywhere in the hallway house. At breakfast, he sat alone and watched the hallway. During recess, he stood by the stairs and did nothing. Night, she showed up next to the landing window on the 3rd floor. The moon lit up her silhouette, and she stood still for hours. It was not possible. She could not be everywhere. Still, the kids seemed to know she was. They never spoke to her or looked her in the eye. They split up around her like water around a rock. Even the most rebellious people were quiet when she went by. Miriam asked Eleanor Holloway once, "Is G1 part of the same intake?" Eleanor didn't look up from her tea because she was busy. She was, born into it. She was born a quiet daughter. Each home needs one. It wasn't an answer, but it told Miriam what she needed to know. She started to connect times of strange compliance, like when the girl cut off a conversation in the middle of it, erased chalk symbols, or folded up drawings. In all of them, Jiwan had been close by. She was the enforcer, but not because she was told to be. One girl whispered a name Miriam had never heard before when she was asked alone. "She's known as the ear." Miriam made a face. "Why?" The girl looked. Away. For the people who don't listen, she does. It wasn't just a figure of speech. There was a note called Tier 1 Auditor in the observation doctrine file she got from an old storage cabinet that was mistakenly labeled Domestic Safety. The description made her feel cold. A girl needs to be broken so badly that she turns into a mirror. People around her will see themselves in her and give in. She doesn't have to talk. Her silence will show her guilt. And below that, a phrase that was highlighted 3 times. She can't think of her name. That's why she only remembers ours. G1 was no longer a child. She carried the doctrine with her and was like a living guard. The other people knew she could show up anywhere at any time. That night, Miriam hid in her car outside the house, behind some overgrown lilac trees. When she woke up at 1:17 a.m., she saw the light in the attic flicker on. In the window, G1 stood alone, facing outward, not blinking or moving. It was buried under old sheets in the supply room that was locked, bound in leather. The spine of the notebook was broken, and the pages were yellowing, but they were still neatly put together. The cover only had the initials on it, no title. Inside of charts, words, and reflections. She read the first few pages. The first thing that needs to happen is silence. The name is the first string. The second is the voice. Eleanor had his hand on it. Careful, deliberate, and completely separate. The notebook laid out the doctrine of unmaking, which is a philosophy that works in steps. Phase 1, break. Take away your own things. Separate from known. Names and language. You can weaken certainty by messing with sleep cycles. The second step is substitution. Give each person a number identity. Ritual responses should be used instead of spontaneous speech. Bring up the order's lexicon. Peace and quiet vessel. Cut. The third step, obedient thought. Use symbolic rewards to encourage people to be quiet. Ribbons of blue and white stones. Bring up the figure of the mirror. G1 as a guide for behavior. Children need to see what happens without being told directly. It was hard for Miriam to breathe. This wasn't carelessness. It was. A purpose, dozens of case notes followed, which were coded but made their goals clear. A lot of them had words like resistance lessening, name faded, or prepared for final submission. The red circle around one note on page 72 made it stand out. G3 is still drawing. Responds to Mina without realizing it. Move around. Miriam remembered that the hem was sewn, the desperate attempt to keep a name. Next up was Mina. There was a page near the end of the notebook that had a ribbon that was torn, as if it were a child's drawing, but it is an exact copy of the hallway house. Each room is marked with a single. Words. Echo of silence. Being still. Cleaning up. One room didn't have a sign. Downstairs. Under it was a rough outline made of black ink that was so thick it had bled through the paper. Nothing on it. just a single word written in Eleanor's steady hand. Every child comes back different. She put the notebook away and looked at the wall for a long time. It wasn't just a quiet house. It was a plan and a workshop. And down below, on the unmarked floor, the last bit of work was being done. She waited until after midnight, which was past curfew. As the house slept, the wind shook the window panes and whispered in the long halls as if to warn. She walked barefoot, and each step felt good on the worn boards. Now she knew the way, past the prayer room with the shutters, through the laundry chute, and down the secret stairs behind the pantry shelf. With each step, the air got cooler. Things had changed in the basement. The storage area that was once a mess looked like it had been carefully cleaned out, with all the boxes and crates taken away. The ground is made of stone, brightened a little from the moisture, as if the walls were sweating. And the door at the far end. It stood like something that was buried and came out. Not even rusty iron or wood. It was made of steel, was matte and black, and was so cold that it steamed in the summer heat. That was it. There was no handle or keyhole, just one etched symbol near the top, a circle that was broken in half by a single downward stroke. She reached out, hesitated, and then put her palm flat on the surface. Nothing. But as she turned to leave, I heard it. There were no words or tears, just breath. A shallow, quick-moving person from the other side. She stopped and leaned in. One breath, then two, a pause, and then a sound that sounds like tapping nails. 3 times, and then there was silence again. Miriam moved back, her hand shaking. The girls had named it the Silent Library. It wasn't a library, though. It was a vault, the last step. After a few days, she went back upstairs. She drew the door's symbol and circled it 3 times in her notebook. It wasn't marked or named, not opened. What was behind that door wasn't just part of the order's rules, it was the end of it all. And someone was still inside. The Western Studies fireplace hadn't been used in years, but Miriam saw that the grate had been moved. Ashes were swept away in a pattern that didn't look quite right. Behind the grate, stuck in a crack in the brick, was a simple wooden box with no lock and just a child's carving of a circle with one vertical line going through it. This was the same symbol from the steel door. A small real estate tape is inside, not a label. Miriam borrowed a player from the town library and wound the tape with shaky hands. She heard static, then a click, and a voice that was barely above a whisper. "You must not be real anymore if you found this." A break in breathing. "After that, they call me Xuro. That's not my name, though. I think my name was Grace." She spoke slowly, like she was trying to remember something through the fog. "The next room. For fun, not as a punishment. That's where they kill you. Where they were. Press what's left over after the silence into something else." At first, there were 3 of us. The other 2 went quiet. One tried to hum after they took her away. She didn't come back. They don't scream. Their only goal is to get you to be so quiet that you can't think. Static at first, then less clearly. There's a window to another room, not the outside. A girl got down on her knees in front of Eleanor. For 20 minutes, she didn't blink while she held a white stone in her mouth. Eleanor smiled when she finally started to cry. One more pause. The voice then became firm. "Tell someone if you hear this. Anyone. They shouldn't bury any more girls here. Even though the order says silence is holy, I think that's where they hide." It was a machine. The tape came off. Miriam took a seat. She looked at the player, then the box, and finally the drawing in her notebook. 3 small dots on the wall above the fireplace matched holes in the drawing that she had thought were just a mistake. It wasn't just a vault in that room. The plan was for it to. Not show up. but one girl had tried to stand out. There was one voice that got through. Grace G0 is the last girl. It was a bad night for Miriam. She spent hours writing a report that was both coded and clear. It showed signs of psychological control, emotional manipulation, and architectural concealment. She sent it through the encrypted channel that all state social workers are given. And then she waited. 2 days went by with no call, no answer, and no confirmation. From the third day on, people in the hallways started to look at her more closely. Eleanor stopped, making it look like she forgot her name. Catherine began locking doors that Miriam had been able to get through before. The girls also became quieter, but not because they were being taught to, but because they were scared. There was a change. One night, right before bed, Miriam came home to find her door open. When she turned around, she saw her. G1. The girl asked the mirror for help. She stood there barefoot and with hair that was still damp from washing it. She had a folded piece of paper in her hand that was so tight that the corners were wrinkly. In silence, she stepped in and held it out. Miriam opened the page. It was a rough. There was a sketch of a floor plan, the basement, the steel door, and writing in shaky pencil below it. The floor isn't stable. It starts up. G1 didn't say anything. She did point to her chest and then to the paper, though. She then said, "Listen," out loud, and left before Miriam could say anything. Miriam went back to the notebook from Eleanor's file that night. She turned the page to the last one. She hadn't seen that phrase before because it was so faint and almost gone. The fault line can only be seen in the mirror. The book was closed. There was a lot of silence, and somewhere below them something was getting ready to rise. The steel door hadn't moved. It was still shut and watching. This time, Miriam didn't go to the door, though. She went to the spot that G1 had marked. Under the dusty rug there was a square piece of wood that was a little darker than the rest of the floor. Miriam pushed on it. It wasn't a creak, it went up. A hinge that was perfectly hidden. It has a spiral staircase made of stone and rusty iron below it, coming down into a hole that swallowed the flashlight beam hole. It was cooler and damper here. As soon as she stepped down, the stone walls got smaller and closer together. After that, she heard it. The only sounds I could hear were soft, layered whispers, some in English and some not, and some people were just breathing. She held on to the railing and kept going. The stairs led to a room that was different from the rest of the house. It was round, made of stone that was older than the house itself, and the ceiling was arched like a tomb. Narrow alleys run along the walls, like places to confess. Each one was closed with heavy curtains sewn shut with red thread. But from behind those curtains, there was a presence. Then silence. And then a voice that was barely audible. "Hello," she said. "Young female." Miriam's heart stopped. The voice asked, "Are you real?" She didn't answer. She just moved forward and pulled a thread out of the knot. When the curtain fell, it showed a girl on her knees, her eyes wide and her skin pale. She looked at the light and blinked. "No one," they said. "Comes back down," Miriam whispered as she kneeled. The girl shook her head when asked, "What's your name?" As more voices came to life, she said, "I forgot." She then looked up and said, "But I remember theirs." From one alcove to the next, dozens of forgotten names, some of them just shadows and some still waiting to speak. Miriam stood in the middle of the room, and there were survivors all around her, not ghosts. The little one with light still behind her eyes was her choice. She was wrapped in a coat and carried out by Miriam before dawn. Too big, no shoes on. There was only one whisper of her name, Claire. They didn't go down that road. They walked 3 miles until the signal came back, going across the ravine and then through the woods. At a gas station, Miriam called the office in her area. She didn't say much, she just said enough to get help. They took Claire into their care in a kind and quiet way, and then told Miriam to wait. She didn't get to. The gates were closed when she got back to the Hull estate that afternoon with an official with her. A handwritten sign on the iron fence marks private land, known by the state. No getting in without a warrant. And that morning, an email was sent to the department that seemed to come from Miriam's own account. It was official. I quit my job right away. I'm not fit to serve anymore. With her name on it, in the past. The order went through more quickly. The girls could no longer be seen through the windows inside. Eleanor stood on the porch and smiled as she put a light touch on G1's shoulder. The person in charge looked at Miriam. For us to get back in, we'll need a formal complaint and a judge's order. For now, their status is safe because of a religious exemption. While Miriam didn't say anything, she couldn't take her eyes off of Eleanor's hand and how it tightened just a bit when G1 jerked. Miriam drove home that night, and instead of sleeping, she wrote down every note, sign, fake name, and map she could remember. After putting it all online, she wrote one sentence at the top. "This is my voice if I disappear." It began with 1. Post again, then 2. Someone from Beckley then found the file. Over 100,000 people downloaded Miriam's file with photos, floor plans, voice transcripts, and names in just 48 hours. All of a sudden, the sign from the steel door was everywhere. People came up to him and asked, "What is this place? Where are these girls? Who are the hallways?" That's not what she called herself. Her name was G4. She confirmed what Miriam had written in an interview that was taped. The quiet. The girls who stopped talking and never came back up. The stone rooms and the underground love holes. They took our names and put codes in their place. They told us that if we were good enough, we'd turn into quiet vessels. But being quiet doesn't help. It stays hidden. Then someone else came forward. Some of them had changed their names. Some of them had scars that you couldn't see. One of them was now a Pennsylvania teacher. That person worked in Kentucky as a food service worker. Every story was like the one before it. A petition for a class action was put in. There was a formal investigation. The hallways, which were once praised for helping girls who were having problems, were given a call. The judge told the police to go to the estate, and when they got there, the gates were open. There was no one in the house. There were no girls, twins, or other signs of a fight. There was only one thing nailed to the inside wall. There was a wooden sign on the wall that looked like a circle with a single line running through the middle. It said, "We do not answer to the world. The world answers to silence." There was no more silence. Everyone could now hear. Ashfern was quiet again, but not in the controlled, planned way it had been before. This time, it was the natural stillness of being left alone. It had been left to rot on the Holloway estate. Over the gates, vines grew, and the windows broke. The house sagged against itself like a body that had finally let out its breath. At the edge of the gravel path, Miriam didn't know why she was there. 5 years had passed since the report, the survivors were polled, and a part of the law was changed to protect children, to include religious isolation as a form of emotional harm that needs protection. But there was one spot she never went back to until now. The door was opened. Everything is gray because of dust. The court ordered that the basement be locked, but Miriam didn't go down there. Instead, she went to the east wing and down a narrow hallway that she had seen 100 times before, but had never noticed the door at the end of it. The knob was rusty, and the wood was warped. It was a small square room with no windows or furniture. There were only words written by hand on the walls, each and every inch of. Plaster with names scratched into it. Dozens or even hundreds. There were first names, middle names, and names that no one could say. A red circle in the middle. One phrase kept repeating like a chant inside it. I'm not a vessel. I'm a girl. Over and over. She wasn't sad. She didn't move. Then she left after whispering, I hear you. The wind blew through the broken rafters above as she shut the door. It came close to sounding like laughter for a moment.